give it a moment. It'll say it's broadcasting before it actually is. All right.
Good afternoon, all, and thank you for being with us for today's public hearing of the Commerce Committee. Before us today are 4 bills, which we are looking forward to having public testimony on. Madam Clerk, I think we have the sign-up list, so we can probably, if there are any comments from my chairs and ranking members, then go right to our speaking list. Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and looking forward to a productive discussion today.
Thank you. Senator Martin.
I am good to go. Thank you.
And Representative Buckby. Rep. Buckby, are you with us?
I am. Hello, Madam Chair.
Hey, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Sorry about that. I'm
any-
looking forward. Just looking forward to
Yes.
hearing what you have to say. Unfortunately, it looks like it might be a short day for hearings for us, but I'm looking forward to hearing from it. And I'm a little upset that Rep. Carpino doesn't have her guest that she had earlier on Zoom with her.
Oh, I missed that.
Caroline,
Was that a special? Yes, I think she is.
She had her son on earlier with her, which was nice.
Oh, it's always a good diversion. Okay, if there are no other comments, then we can proceed to our first speaker who is with us today. That's Commissioner Lehman. You have the floor, sir.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman and Representative Simmons, Senator Martin, as well as Representative Buckby. It's good to be back here at the Commerce Committee. What I thought I would do is we submitted written testimony as well as a brief presentation for this committee and for the public. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, Senator Hartley, is take the committee through briefly our presentation, which I think probably does a better job of explaining the 2 bills that we're proponents of in lay terms. So do I have the ability to share my screen?
I do too.
There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Looks
Fair
good.
enough. Okay, so the 2 bills that I'm going to be speaking about really in order here is the JobCT tax rebate program, as well as our proposed amendments to Small Business Express. For those with a longer memory, we myself and Deputy Commissioner Thames were in front of this committee roughly a year ago in support of these same bills. Our support continues, and if anything, our conviction is probably higher than it was a year ago in terms of the need for these policy changes here in the state of Connecticut. First up on Jobs Connecticut, and as I've testified before, Connecticut has a history of providing at times significant tax incentives that were not as transparent, that were not earn-as-you-go or performance-based, and at times they were targeted, but we're trying to narrow the focus here. So the new strategy that we want to employ and embrace from a policy perspective is JobCT, which has the benefit of being transparent. So specifically, there will be a very clear, simple formula, that every company, whether you're growing in the state of Connecticut or you're contemplating coming to the state of Connecticut, that you will benefit from for job creation as it relates to incentives. There's no black box. You're not reliant on the commissioner of DECD or designee to make a determination in terms of what those incentives may be. The second point is what we call earn as you grow, or I referenced before, performance base. The benefit from job creation in the state to companies will come after the companies create those jobs and maintain those jobs. And the payments to the companies, it will be a rebate, which will be earned over time. And this is a departure from what the state has done previously, where certain monies were provided upfront in the form of debt or forgivable loans to companies. And what this does is it takes away any of the business risk or credit risk from state taxpayers that are providing the subsidy to the business. And really the burden is now on the business to grow those jobs first before they benefit from the incentive. And the last point here is we're trying to really target industries that are what we call export or tradable industries. So industries that are doing business outside of the state of Connecticut for a portion of their revenue, whether it's service or products, and really focused on industries where we think there will be high job growth, in addition to wages that are livable wages in the state of Connecticut. We want to make sure that we're fostering and encouraging those types of industries as opposed to ones that we just don't think are suited or have an edge in the state of Connecticut. So it's fairly broad, but at the same time, you know, we're trying to be very clear in terms of where we're focused on these industries. So here's an overview in a bit more detail, and maybe I'll start on the left here. So the industries, and that's not a completely holistic list, but on the left side of the page, financial services, insurance, manufacturing, clean energy, bioscience, technology, and digital media. Those are all industries that we think are well suited for Connecticut. We either have a footprint or want to grow a footprint, and we think that those industries can and will flourish in the state. As it relates to how the actual rebate will work, so if you're an eligible employer, and we'll come back to that, there is a 25% rebate of the withholding taxes from net new jobs that are hired for a period of time. And if those jobs are located in a distressed municipality or an opportunity zone, those jobs will, that same employer will be eligible for a 50% rebate. The thought there from a policy perspective is to encourage job creation where we need it the most, where we have right now the highest unemployment in many areas and some higher poverty, lower wages. So we thought the rebate should be higher in those areas to address that. In terms of becoming an eligible employer or eligible for this program, one needs to create in those industries 25 or more jobs. There is a minimum salary, 85% of the median household income for the area, or an annual salary floor of $37,500. The rebate is capped and floored, so we wanted to make sure that there is a minimum benefit of $1,000 per year for the 5-year period, and it's capped at $5,000 per year. So there is some level of progressivity here where if these are extremely high-paying jobs, you know, the benefit is capped, and for you know, other jobs that are closer to a living wage or thereabouts, there's a floor as well, because we wanted to keep it, again, simple and transparent was a big key. The base rebate will be for a 5-year period, but there will be up to 7 years of rebate at the discretion of the commissioner of DCD. So that is the program in a nutshell. Again, the benefit of this is, you know, we can put this up on our website. We can broadcast this to companies in the state, local economic development officials, local municipal CEOs. All of them will be able to understand very clearly and be able to calculate very clearly based on an employment assumption and a salary assumption what that rebate looks like. Just quickly, we wanted to show where there are opportunity zones, where there are distressed municipalities, or both across the state. So this gives you a sense of just opportunity zones, just distressed municipalities, and then a combination of the two. So pretty good geographic mix here. You know, this slide I find particularly helpful, and I don't want to overstay my welcome with this committee, but you know, we wanted to compare what we think is the new regime versus the previous regime, or the previous framework, I should say. So on average, we think, you know, for a typical job, Job CT will, the incentive for that job, and again, it's all back-ended, so there's no credit risk or business risk that the state taxpayer is taking, you know, but the cost will be between $5,000 and $10,000, and certainly it couldn't be less because that's the floor at $5,000. It could be more, but on average, that's what we expect. Importantly, though, we're going to cap how much of this can be done in any given year, but not bond for it, which also is a departure from what the state did previously. You know, DECD in my first 2 years here, and obviously last year was the pandemic, but you know, our bonding is down, you know, close to 70%. So we think this is the responsible way to do it, not to bond for these types of incentives, but to limit them as effectively a shortfall or a diminution in net new revenue in terms of the incremental jobs that are coming into the state is how we're framing it, how we're thinking about it. And really what we're doing here is we're trying to align ourselves with other states that have these performance-based incentives. Again, most states did function differently than we did, you know, as it relates to how incentives would work. And then we compare this versus the MAA program, in addition to First Five, which was part of that and utilized MAA. But you see there was significant bonding that occurred in certain years, and you see the recent years being much less. but on a per job basis, it was close to $20,000, just under 19,000. And again, you see, we were paying more. There was more risk in that number because if a company went delinquent or defaulted, that they had our money already, as opposed to getting our money after the jobs were created. So that's just a very high level compare and contrast in terms of lower cost going forward, less bonding, and when we're going to have a cap on it. Shifting very briefly to Small Business Express 2.0. The Small Business Express program was a very, in my opinion, well-intended program when it was formulated coming out of the Great Recession, roughly 10 years ago at this point in time. This was a time when we had a banking crisis, a financial crisis, and there just was not available debt capital from Connecticut banks or national banks to provide credit to the economy and to growing businesses. So it was a needed program at the time. There were not lenders. I really do contrast that with the current environment, even coming out of COVID. This is not a banking crisis. This is not a financial crisis from a lending perspective. Bank loan books in general look fairly good, and it's still a very competitive market, and we expect that to be the case coming out of COVID. So the goal here is for the state not to compete with banks and not to try to fill a hole that, in my opinion, just isn't there right now. And the goal is for Connecticut the state to collaborate, and we can talk about what that means with the lending community, really in two main areas. One is to focus our discrete resources on areas, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, areas where there's a greater need for capital in more underbanked areas of the state, including in some of our distressed municipalities. And in addition to that, we're going to be a lot more targeted with our direct resources and direct lending, and we'll talk about how we do that. And then the second aspect of this is, for broad, if it's a People's Bank or a Webster Bank or other banks that we're going to make a small business loan, but they needed some incremental credit support, we are going to pursue a broad loan guarantee program. But importantly, banks will have the option to opt into that program. They will not be mandated to do it. And we as a state will not be competing with banks, which I think is, again, not necessary right now and was not our best use of our discrete resources. So this provides a little bit more detail on the two-prong approach. Again, on the left side here, this is the Capital Access for Business. This is the guarantee program that I was alluding to. So what is really, in my opinion, elegant about this and effective, more importantly, about this is, if the state is to provide a guarantee, whether that's, let's assume it's 2% of the loan balance, the leverage you have on that is 50 times that amount. So for every $1 million of guarantee, we're providing, that is enabling $50 million of loans. So there's a lot of, even when we're going to do a guarantee, there's a lot of private market capital that is in the space that we are facilitating. So that leverage ratio is really important, as opposed to when we make $1 million loan under the previous regime. Well, it was $1 million loan. You didn't have $50 million of credit extension. So that's a very, very big difference. And this guarantee program, it's not rocket science. Other states do this, and we're just looking to look at states that do this well and emulate them and try to copy them where we think it's effective. On the right side, though, is what I alluded to before, which is with the bonding resources for Small Business Express, rather than use them broadly and compete with banks, we want to target them to areas of the state that don't have access to capital. And importantly, we want to work with community development financial institutions on enabling those banks, potentially with state dollars, potentially a public-private partnership, to make those loans. So we're not going to look to do that direct. We're going to look to pros to utilize some state funds to do that. But again, in areas where we feel like there's a great need. So this gives you a sense of Small Business Express. So upper left is the total amount of deals that DECD did empirically. And you can see in 2012, 13, 14, 15, we were doing a lot of loans. And you can see on the right-hand margin is number of recipients. In our peak, we did 450 approximately loans totaling over $60 million in 2013. But that has waned, and even prior to Governor Lamont and the current administration, you saw less demand. Why? Well, because banks have capital. The banking and lending market is quite competitive, and there was not a need for the state, again, in my opinion, to compete with them. So that trend was already occurring, prior to the Lamont administration. I think we just want to recognize this and again utilize our resources where we think there's a need, as opposed to compete with the private market. Bottom right you know, this shows, this effectively is the same chart in reverse, which is you see bank lending per the Fed increasing over that same time period by 64%. So really trying to just make it clear the data suggests that there's not the need for this program and that there is ample bank lending, again, broadly at the state level. So benefits here, and I don't want to be redundant, but the benefit here really is we're partnering with the private sector as opposed to competing with them. We're leveraging state capital in this guarantee program considerably. We're aligning our resources with what we think are the needs. And again, this I think will reduce bonding needs. This will save costs and further mitigate taxpayer risk in the future. So, you know, we think this is a program, and we've discussed this with banks extensively as well when we were formulating how the program should transition. We think this type of program is it's well timed that we embrace this and move on from the small state as a small business lender broadly. So we did put we tried to estimate the costs here on this. And again, these can vary depending on how big or not big we want to be in these various spaces. But we think in terms of the capital access for business, the guarantee program, you know, we think the total cost is quite small relative to what we were doing. There is some operating cost, and then there is going to be, again, depending on the loans that are needed, we're assuming 20 million of loans here and 1.7 million of guarantee fee. But if there are more loans that are needed, I would suggest that our loan guarantee should increase ratably if there's a need in the market. Again, not clear how many banks are going to take us up on this, given there are federal programs and others that are out there. And then the direct lending, again, this is something where we're proposing 6 million annually. We think this could be bigger, candidly, coming out of the recession, but that's a discussion that we should have. Is that sufficient, working with the CDFIs to meet the direct need for capital from these businesses in areas that are underbanked and underserved? I'm not going to go through the appendix just for the spirit of time, but we basically put the formulas here and really quantified, you know, for a sample employer, you know, what that benefit would be in or out of an opportunity zone. And you can get a sense of what, you know, what is the state share of the revenue, again, 75% versus the company share, 25% here. So we did that both as an opportunity zone and in and out of an opportunity zone at different salary points. So one at 100,000 and then the other at 60,000. So I'm going to stop my screen share, Madam Chair, and I am happy to answer any and all questions the committee has.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I have no questions. Are there questions from my colleagues?
Madam Chair, we have Representative Buckby and Representative Nuccio, followed by Representative Simmons.
Representative Buckby, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. Good to see you as always.
Great to be here.
And you've been certainly working overtime on your Zoom of late, so I commend that as well. Seen you a lot lately. So first off, I do want to commend the not competing with banks. I think that's a critical component to what you've said and something we want to do. But I want to go back a little bit to the start of your presentation there with when you have the cap, when you set the cap is, I get it, I understand. But if this is working properly and the growth is occurring, will the cap be the right thing to do? Should we raise that cap, or should that be, you know, I'm one who normally wears a cap, but I prefer cap less when it's something positive and working in the right direction to what we're looking for.
My view on that, Representative, is I just think it's important to have some guardrails and some mechanism for reevaluation, right? DECD does an annual report now, and I am mindful of some of the history and audits of DECD in the past, but I think having, you know, if we're providing 40 million or more of tax credits in any one given year, it should be working where we're encouraging a lot of job growth. But for some reason, if I'm wrong or it's wrong, there needs to be a mechanism to say, hey, this is significant relative to our $20+ billion per annum budget. Let's figure out, is this really working? And if we want to increase the cap or take off the cap at that time, that's fine. But I think there should be a forcing mechanism as it relates to evaluating the program.
I appreciate that. And is there a mechanism in place to increase that as we go with this, or you know, is there something I missed on that part of it too?
No, there's not. It's a cap that is flat at a certain level here. So the mechanism is going to be when future budgets are proposed. You know, there's going to be a suggestion should that cap increase as part of that because of the efficacy or lack thereof of this program. So it'll be part of that budgeting requirement, like other tax credits.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think the thing I would consider is is it 2 years out from an adjustment to that? If it's working so well, especially in the situation we're in now, I think it might be something we wanted to access a little bit sooner than 2 years out.
Yeah, it's a good question. And maybe I should have made this point before. I don't feel like we're encumbered or the cap is a constraint at all right now, Representative Buckby. So if I felt like, wow, we're going to be, our hands are tied or we're limited, I think we're going to have fair amount of runway here in the new framework with the 40 million. I think where the cap could become an issue is, every year, if you add, let's assume we add 5,000 jobs through the program this year. Again, that's a high quality problem, arguably. But then when you get in that year 3, year 4, year 5, at that point in time, because of a compounding effect, that's where I think the cap could be constraining, and that's when that conversation will happen. But for this year and for the next year, I don't think that the cap is going to be a constraint.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, to me, that's one of those questions you have. You go, hey, so on the upside, if this is going really, really well, we don't want to handcuff ourselves to a spot. That's all. But
Yes.
Certainly appreciate your comments with it. I'm sure there's others who have great questions. As always, great to get your feedback and your input here. And Madam Chair, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Representative Buckby. Representative Nuccio, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And hello again, Commissioner. It seems like I just saw you.
That's right. So I'm sorry if this is like Groundhog's Day for you, Rep. Nuccio, but yes.
It is, right? Everywhere I turn around. So first off, I want to commend you. I love the idea. I've said often that Connecticut was not in the way that we were doing things before. And I like the idea of incentivizing as we actually see growth rather than kind of just assuming it's going to be there and putting the money up front. So I love that idea. I do have some questions though around a couple of things. First off, can you either tell me or point me to where I can find specifically what are the job CT focused industries currently? Are those the workforce development industries?
No, so, and I'll reshare my, so the industries, I don't know if you can see the left-hand side of the
Oh,
Zoom
I didn't
here.
even look at the left-hand side.
So those are the industries, but in addition to that, corporate headquarters are a focus. R&D facilities, distribution, and logistics are added. So those aren't industries per se, as opposed to specific subsectors or areas of an industry. In addition to that, Representative, there is flexibility in the legislation that's afforded to the DECD commissioner if there's a company that they feel is a significant growth industry or company outside of those industries. The commissioner will have some discretion on that. But the important thing for me as it relates to this is, we want to be encouraging growth of businesses that again do significant business outside the state of Connecticut, whether that's in New York or England. I'm open-minded. We don't want to be. I think it would be counterproductive to incentivize businesses that operate within the four walls of our economy, because then we're disadvantaging one business versus another, and I think that would be a mistake and counterproductive for taxpayer dollars.
I agree with you. One of the main pieces of this legislation that you had just presented to us here is to develop a process for expanding the state partnership with banks to provide lending. Does the state currently directly lend?
Yes.
Is it a direct lend? It appeared to be the state doing direct lend loans.
We were, and that's the small business program, and that's what I'm advocating. There's no more need for that. Since Governor Lamont took office in the current administration, we have significantly minimized the amount of loans we've made. We have made a few of them, but the program is still on the books. So this will give us the flexibility not to do the direct lending anymore, broadly statewide.
So this would be taking the state out of the direct lending business.
Again, I want to be careful with my language. Yes, broadly, we are asking for the flexibility to be more targeted to areas that are, again, underserved and underbanked from a capital perspective, like our cities, like some of our women and minority businesses. What we want to avoid is, that business that 3 banks would make a loan to. I don't think the state of Connecticut should be making a loan to. If the state of Connecticut has $25 million to allocate to small business growth, let's put it where there's a real need as opposed to competing with the private market. So that's the distinction. We still may make loans, but it will be through a CDFI and much more targeted at areas of need versus the past.
Okay, and maybe if you could humor me, can you tell me what the inherent risk is with the state doing direct loans? And with the partnership, so if you're going to do targeted loans with more areas of need in that. Would the partnership then be looking at doing loans just for any small business, or are you still looking at limiting it to certain populations?
No, just to be precise, so the state, when I say the state would be directly, it would be through a CDFI or through a fund manager, a community financial institution. So the state wouldn't be doing the direct kind of the customer onboarding, the underwriting. My hope is to work with folks that do this every day. And that's maybe the answer to your first question. I just think the state should focus on what we do well, and we should let others that do lending well do it, because that's just not what we do. So I feel strongly that we should specialize, and we should let those that do their jobs well specialize too.
Okay, so then there's not really any big inherent direct risk with making these loans for default or anything like that, because it's going through a financial organization.
Yeah, well, we're going to be subject to credit risk, whether in the guarantee program or the direct lending program. We're just not going to be making that business judgment just ourselves at DCD. We're going to be letting a bank make it in the guarantee program effectively, and then the CDFI or equivalent in the direct lending program. So we're effectively using an outside manager, if you want to think about it like that. We're looking to the bank's expertise or the CDFI's expertise to help allocate capital.
So we're outsourcing it kind of, which is to people who can best handle it. Okay, sorry, I'm taking notes. That sounds good. So the 40 million cap then is to put a limit on which portion of that? The piece that you guys are going to keep, the smaller portion, or?
No, the 40 million cap is just for the job CT, the job growth incentive. That's not for the small business lending.
Okay.
So that's just the credit. The reality is for the small business, whether it's guarantee or the lending through a CDFI, that will require bonding capacity, and those are dollars that we'll need to allocate.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Nucio. Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies, I've got another Zoom on. I'll turn this down for my Human Services meeting.
A lot going on these days now.
Indeed. A couple of questions. So first, with respect to the industries that you mentioned, Commissioner, and I know that these were some of the industries that we were focusing on, prior to the pandemic as being sort of high growth industries in our state. But I'm wondering, amidst kind of COVID and the devastating effects that it has had on industries like, hospitality and tourism, I'm wondering if you think it's, it'd be worth adding those in as a focus to this legislation.
So I wouldn't, to be direct and succinct on this point. I think there may be some exceptions, Rep. Simmons, on where a hospitality or a tourism business does come in. I do think we want to be careful really on two fronts. One, what I would refer to as the return to normal, and a lot of the money at the federal level that stimulated and will stimulate that, in my opinion, as and when the economy opens. So I think much of that will happen. And my personal view is I think you will see an incredible summer, I think, for tourism and business and pent-up demand. And I think you'll see COVID levels that afford folks to do that. That's my personal view. So I don't think this legislation is meant to address that. This is meant to be more on a steady state basis. What jobs do we want to encourage? And when we talk about the tourism industry or the hospitality industry, this question about what is how much of it is kind of an export industry is going to be important. So if it is a tourist site, or a hotel, for example, where 70% of their visitors are coming from out of state, yeah, I think that should be considered, and I think that's right. But if it's a hotel that 20% of their customers come from out of state, I don't think that should be considered. So the devil's in the details there. In addition, we need to make sure that the jobs are at the floor too. So I think it could be, but I would not recommend we put it on the focused industry front, because I think many businesses might not qualify unless they have that export revenue line.
Got it. Thank you for that answer, Commissioner. And another question I had is the analysis you provided on the cost per job being 5,000 to 10,000, and very much appreciated the contrast about how much lower that was compared to the cost per job under First Five. And I also think that there could be new revenue that would also come to the state and local governments on this in terms of local tax revenue and state tax revenue. That could be incorporated into this. So just wanted to mention that point on the ROI there. And then also another question I had is in terms of the way that the rebates are structured, and in terms of the other states that have programs like this. I think you mentioned about 5 other states have this. How do you find that this program and kind of incentive compares to what other states are doing? And do you think it's enough to really encourage this job creation and get those results?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Let me give it a shot. The knock-on incentives, and I spent a lot of time in 2019 on this, is states put out this money, and it's a game of sorts, candidly, and it's a game that taxpayers lose, and that's why you want to minimize the cost while maintaining efficacy. And I think our view and Governor Lamont's view is, we want a Connecticut that can compete on its merits and strengths. And, every state has some incentive program. So there is a box to check there. But, if a company's coming to Connecticut because we're paying them the most money, in my opinion, that's not a good day for taxpayers. And I'm not sure that's meant to work out over the long term. So I think we need to have what I refer to as a competitive program. I don't think we need to be the best. I don't want to be the best. I don't think anyone should want that because taxpayers are providing this subsidy. And I would argue it's regressive actually as well. But ultimately, we want to minimize this and maximize maintaining the jobs, because a lot of jobs would come to a state anyway, is what I think many studies have found, even if there weren't incentives. And that's always the trick here. So much of this location decision, you want to pay for what you're getting, but if you were going to get it anyway, you don't want to pay for it. So that's a long way of me saying we want something that's competitive, that reduces risk, and I think is in the context of what companies want. And I think this does that.
Got it. Thanks for that answer. And just one final question on SBX 2.0. I totally understand the reasoning and the slides you presented on, how much more banks are lending now compared to when this, program was set up amidst the 2008 recession when banks weren't lending. And, we clearly don't have that problem now. So it makes sense to partner with the private sector. But one concern I have is we know that only 4% of all commercial lending from the private sector goes to women and minority-owned businesses. And so just want to make sure, how can we ensure that we're helping those businesses that really need this access to capital, ensure they get that funding?
Yeah, and that is the key. We were very deliberate, and we provided this to appropriations, but we were very deliberate in a lot of the support programs, grant programs, and lending programs during the crisis to make sure that women and minority-owned businesses, that we really focused on those areas, and we had good results in that regard. You can see the testimony and the data that we provided to appropriations. But I think in terms of lending going forward more on a steady state basis, that is the role of engaging these CDFIs. And in my mind, it is utilizing our bonding funds, and let's craft a program that focuses on, X% or more minority women businesses, or in certain cities where we think that the capital going to those small businesses is quite low, and then let the professionals deploy that capital, and develop that market. So we definitely need to target those areas because many of them are underrepresented relative to the size of those small businesses in the state.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner, for your testimony and those answers. And thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Representative Simmons. Representative Thomas, you have the floor, Madam.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Commissioner. First, I'd just like to say I so appreciate all the work you've done since you began in this position to both better leverage Connecticut's dollars, which, as you state, are taxpayer dollars. So I've really enjoyed watching you these last, it feels like 5 years, but it hasn't been quite that long. I have a couple of questions that are a bit in the weeds. So if it makes more sense to discuss this offline, let me know. On the Small Business Express program, again, thank you to DECD for helping to roll out assistance to a lot of these businesses during the pandemic. One thing that I've heard from some of the boots on the ground, if you will, and I'm sure you've heard it many times before, that access to capital, while important, groups are reporting that the technical assistance needs, like that capacity building, is almost more important to both being able to put that capital to work, and or once they receive the capital, to be able to make it profitable. In this Small Business Express program, is there any component to deal with that, or is it assumed that other organizations will sort of step into the breach?
No, it's a great question, and it is envisioned on not on the guarantee side, where we're going to look to banks to make those loans and use their process, but on the direct lending or the CDFI lending, technical assistance will be part of that program. We will need to discuss how, whenever we're talking about potentially operating expenses as opposed to just the lending, we want to make sure that we're judicious in terms of that, but we realize those two go hand in hand. So it's not appropriate just to talk about lending if there's not the operational expertise or know-how to use that capital and create the business and create the jobs. So that will absolutely be part of what we do on the CDFI lending side of things. We need to work with the CDFIs, again, assuming this legislation is successful, and discuss how that should work, and then make sure, importantly, there's real metrics on monitoring it, and if this is a successful program. The other thing I would just say that the governor has allocated $40 million in workforce for this Career Connect CT. And I do think a lot of the workforce strategy initiatives are going to go hand in hand with some of these entrepreneurial ventures as well. But that is stuff that we need to work out as we move forward on this legislation.
Well, I have an idea. If you can solve it, you can sell that to every other state, and Connecticut would be rolling in the dollars. My other questions are about the Job CT program. So I'm sure you've thought about this. I didn't see it in the actual bill language, but frankly, I could have missed it. With programs like these, I feel like, especially when you're targeting distressed communities and opportunity zones, what sometimes happens is that, once you get into the program, people try to hire within these communities, but either say they can't find the talent or, fill in the blank. And before you know it, people are commuting in from New York or Massachusetts, et cetera. Are there any guardrails to make sure that, the intended goal of keeping jobs in these communities will happen, and two, that there aren't too many loopholes to allow companies to say they just can't fill the roles and to seek other?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the punchline is, this is a blunt instrument, and I think part of the key for this type of legislation is keeping it simple. So it's where the jobs are physically going to be located is going to determine if that's a 50% benefit or not. So whether if that location, manufacturing location, for example, is in Bridgeport, then it would be eligible. Now, whether someone's commuting from Weston or Westport or other areas to that location, the employer, and when I think of the ancillary benefits and the multiplier, that is going to be in that physical Bridgeport location. So I don't think we can say you need to be a resident of Bridgeport. I just think we care where those jobs are located and where the companies set down their roots in these physical assets. And then I think my view is you will see the benefits, whether people commute there or ultimately live there or buy lunch there, you're going to see the benefits over time if we have more job creation in those locations, regardless of where people are commuting from.
So just to be sure I understand, so I live in Norwalk, for example. If a company sets up in Norwalk, but their employees commute in from Westchester, they would still get the 50% or the 25%?
Well, Norwalk is not.
It's not opportunities.
Yeah.
It was on your map as an opportunity.
One of the opportunity zones in Norwalk. Yeah. So by Sono, for example, no, that would be 50%. So the employer who's made the investment in Norwalk would get the 50% rebate on the income taxes. And again, that commuter from Westchester is paying Connecticut income taxes if they work in the state of Connecticut.
True. Okay, so, okay. And my last question, just because I don't know how similar programs work, my day job is in the nonprofit sector, and I know we always struggle with this concept of real cost. No government reimburses the actual cost of getting the job done. So when I see 85% of medium household income, it starts to feel a little bit like state-sponsored poverty, if you will. So I would just love to know more about how that figure is derived. Is it based on some of the models you looked at? How do you arrive at that 85% number?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and not to get too deep into the math here, but we looked at the amount of households in the state and the amount of labor force in the state, and we tried to, ideally you'd have a really good median income at the individual level. That's actually quite tough to find. So we adjusted, and I think there's 1.3 or 1.4 jobs per household. Not every household has 2 jobs, so we tried to adjust to get to what was 100, I believe is 110% of what we thought the individual median income was, but at the household level, and that's the 110, I believe, divided by that 1.3 or 1.4 is the 85%. So again, we're trying to keep this simple. So if you're an employer thinking about Connecticut, okay, at these wages, am I eligible or am I not eligible? The reality is at those lower levels, you're at the 1,000 per job per year floor of incentive. So really they're going to say, okay, I'm above the median, or I'm above that 37.5, and I'm good for $1,000 per year of rebate over that 5-year period.
Got it. Okay.
So the goal is to keep it simple, but that we just wanted to make sure that very low paying jobs, we were not incentivizing, because I think that is not appropriate.
I do appreciate that 37,000 minimum. I think that's important. In Fairfield County, that is a poverty rate still, but I understand. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. Are there any other hands raised? I do not see any. So if that is the case, we will, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We will move on to our next bill, which is, or our next person who is going to be testifying. That's Ashley Zane. Ashley, are you with us?
I am.
Good to see you.
You too. So good afternoon, Chairs Hartley and Simmons, Ranking Members Buckby and Martin, and members of the Commerce Committee. My name is Ashley Zane. I'm a Government Affairs Associate with the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. We represent thousands of businesses across the state, and we're here in support of HB 6440, an act establishing the JobCT tax rebate program. This policy very closely aligns with CBIA's Rebuild Connecticut policy pledge, and it focuses on 2 major buckets that were included in that pledge, which are urban renewal and increasing taxpayer return on investment. This program is clear and transparent and focuses on mid-sized companies, which have historically been ignored and left out of the conversation. CBIA supports the focus of this bill on our state's emerging sectors like bioscience, manufacturing, finance, and aerospace, just to name a few, and focusing on homegrown businesses, which are going to be critical as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of urban renewal, CBIA supports the increased incentives for businesses within opportunity zones and distressed municipalities. As you all know, these areas have been underinvested in, and this program targets expansion within those areas, and also not at the cost or detriment of suburban or rural communities. This bill increases taxpayer return on investment by being straightforward and eliminating the ad hoc nature of prior programs. So capped at $40 million, this bill drastically decreases bonding, it reduces clawback efforts, and it significantly reduces risk by requiring job growth prior to issuing the rebate. So CBIA supports the direction of the Department of Economic and Community Development and this Earn As You Go program. We're also here in support of HB 6467, not concerning the Small Business Express program. This program has helped so many small businesses expand and grow their footprint in Connecticut. In this new economic era, partnering with private sector and community banks increases lending capacity and ensures capital for higher risk businesses who do have trouble accessing traditional markets. Some of our members have raised some concerns about shifting this program, and we hope that the department will continue to evaluate and be adaptable as markets change, just to make sure that every tool is available for small business. And we also hope that moving forward, this program remains competitive with other states. So with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and we do support these 2 bills.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ashley. Thanks a lot for being with us today. I had an opportunity to be part of this morning's address, the CBIA State of the State. And I love the agenda and also this concept of the public-private initiative. It's not ever going to be perfect, but I do think that working with private sector, we will be able to leverage and have a far greater reach. So I want to commend the organization for that. And my recollection is that CBIA is primarily small businesses, is it not?
Yeah, we have about 95% are considered small businesses as our members.
Uh-huh. So I'm wondering if the association is taking a position or would like to comment on the Earn As You Go program with respect to the identified sectors that will be targeted or for this program and this incentive, as opposed to those that aren't on the list, which I think probably represents, your membership on both sides.
Yeah, so with this bill, it does allow the commissioner to have discretion about other businesses that could be within this program. So it doesn't necessarily exclude, the hospitality or tourism industries that were stated before, but we would definitely support them being included in this program.
But you have not taken a position on that, is what you're saying?
We haven't at this moment, but we would definitely support that moving forward. I think looking at the industries that have been included, there are a lot of the strengths that Connecticut is starting to emerge as innovation leaders, and fostering that given the $40 million cap. I think we should be focusing on our strengths, but we would love to see hospitality included as well.
And what percent of your organization, just roughly, is in that sector?
I'll have to get back to you. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay, since we don't have anyone signed up from the sector to comment on this, that's the nature of my questions. I'm just trying to get a read here, across the business community. And then Ashley, you made a comment about your membership flagging the shift on the SBX 2.0. Can you comment on that further, please?
Yeah, so a lot of our businesses relied heavily on grant funding and providing those initial dollars. So shifting over basically to a straight loan program, some of our members do have some concerns, especially when businesses are starting out. They don't have a whole lot of history to go out and get loans typically, which is why we do like them partnering with community banks and other institutions to help leverage these funds. But that grant aspect has been critical for a lot of our smaller businesses.
So basically, your concerns are with the new startups because they have not posted revenue and they've maybe not made the threshold of being in business for a year.
Correct. Yep. And also given the fact that we have had a pandemic, looking at financial statements over this past year isn't exactly comparable to what's happened in the past.
So essentially what you're saying to us is that this program creates a gap.
It does a little bit, yep.
And your proposal with respect to that is to have the old model, which was a grant, well, they were forgivable loans for a certain population of small business?
Yeah, we would be very supportive of forgivable loans. And also if there were specific instances, for example, if there was a recession or like COVID-19, the ability for this program to actually give out loans or grants.
Yes, those are, I guess, mitigating circumstances. Ashley, thank you very much. Appreciate, as always, you working and staying in touch with the committee. Questions from my co-chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions.
Thank you. Rep. Buckby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Ashley. Good to see you as always.
Likewise.
And always good to have the input of CBIA I know you touched base really on two of the bills. I was looking more to get more feedback from you on 429. I was hoping I'd see a little more from that. As far as the grants to the Chamber of Commerce, anything more you'd like to elaborate on that piece for us? Maybe if you're, I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not prepared.
Yeah, we would support that bill. We took a look at it and we will be submitting testimony in support of it. We would like to see dollars to the Chambers of Commerce stay within the state. They provide so many great resources and funding opportunities for the businesses that are a part of their chambers. So we would just like to see those dollars stay in Connecticut. And additionally, a lot of these chambers weren't eligible for the PPP program, or at least the first and second rounds. So we really need to make sure that Connecticut taxpayer dollars are staying with Connecticut Chamber of Commerce's.
I think that's a valid point. I think that's all I have. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Buckby. There are no other hands raised at this point. Yes.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I think I got my hand up
Yes,
late.
I see you. Yeah, Rep. Thomas, you have the floor. Go ahead. ma'am.
Thank you. Hi, Ashley. You just said something which I actually, when I read the bill for 429, I was curious. How big of an issue is this? I actually had no idea that we would have been funding out-of-state chambers. Can you educate me a little bit?
So what we've been told is there have been some issues with outside chambers trying to acquire different Connecticut chambers. So what this bill would do is it would just keep the money within the Connecticut chambers, or at least limit the amount of money that could go out of these out-of-state chambers. So that's really where it's an issue, but we are going to be working with the Chambers of Commerce that we're in contact with to get some more information on it.
So meaning, is it like border towns we're talking about, or are they trying to institute an affiliate system? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so it's the border towns working across the state lines, because obviously people don't just stay within their one state or within their one town. So that's kind of the biggest issue at the moment, and also just to make sure that these dollars stay within the state.
And is there any risk of, I don't know, I'm just making up an example. If, I don't know, the Stamford Chamber was collaborating with, I don't know, the Bronx Chamber, but maybe they were getting more upside potential from that allegiance. Are we at risk of hurting any of our in-state chambers by adopting this?
I don't think we would be hurting any of our in-state chambers. The bill limits what an outside chamber could get to what in-state chambers get.
Got it.
So this way it would be more of a partnership in that instance.
Great. Thank you so much for the education. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Thomas. I don't see any other hands raised at this time, which means we will proceed on to our next speaker. And I believe that this is going to be on SB 879, Mark McGoldrick. Are you with us, Mark?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, Mark. Yes,
Can you
you have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
I can't. Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I don't know if you're on camera, but yeah. Oh, we got you. Yeah. Hi, Mark.
Hi. Good afternoon, Chairman Hartley, Chairman Simmons, and other honorable members of the Commerce Committee. My name is Mark McGoldrick. I own and operate 6 Comfort Keepers offices across the state of Connecticut, providing home care to seniors. I am also currently the chairman of the Connecticut chapter of the Home Care Association of America. And I wanted to thank the committee for proposing Senate Bill 879, which seeks to amend a bill that was passed in 2019. It was actually part of a budget bill. It wasn't even a standalone bill. I think because of some of the opposition it would have faced at that point. But what had happened was home care was targeted and singled out as an industry. We're not quite sure why. I think it would be worth exploring why home care and no other industry was targeted for this legislation. But the law was written as a ban on non-competes. And the non-compete aspect of the law, we actually supported. What the non-compete ban did was it prohibited home care agencies from preventing their caregivers to work for other home care agencies. And we've always supported that. I mean, the way the industry functions is that caregivers typically work for multiple agencies at a time. So it's kind of a standard industry convention. And we've always supported that. The way the law was written, however, it got into contract law, right? It made void all the other contracts that home care agencies have with their clients and caregivers. The two main assets of a home care business are its clients and its caregivers. And we spend extraordinary sums of money on recruiting, training, orienting, providing with benefits our caregivers, and then providing them with work schedules that work around what the hours that they want, and then providing ongoing support and supervision. The same thing with our clients. We spend an inordinate sum of money in attracting new clients and in gaining their confidence and signing them up as new clients. And the way the original law was written is either our client or our caregiver could take the other one away from our business. So in essence, a caregiver could tap a client that we introduced them to on the shoulder and say, hey, come with me, we'll go off the books, which by the way would put the senior in grave danger because there would nobody looking out for their care at that point. And we'll do this off the books, we'll do this privately, and you'll save a few bucks and I'll make a few more, and we'll go on our merry way. That is what is allowed currently the way the law is written. And the same thing with our client. The client can say, hey, you're a great caregiver, I really like you. I don't want to really continue to pay this agency, so why don't you come to work for me privately?
Are now up. Please summarize your statements.
Okay. So what we're looking for here is to rectify that. We're okay continuing the non-compete, but we'd like to have the ability to sign valid contracts with both our clients and our caregivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So do I recall, yeah, this came about in the budget implementer, I think. And then there was some testimony because this was before Commerce, I believe, last round. But there was some testimony from, I guess, DSS in opposition to this proposed change, or going back to where it was originally. Can you comment on that, Mark?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's clearly some errors with the way they've written this. They don't seem to understand that there are valid contracts with both a client and a caregiver that an agency should have. And we don't have a problem. Our contracts only say that you can't work, that the caregiver cannot work for the client for a period of 6 months. It's not a forever ban, but we're saying that, we match these two people up. They're both principal assets of the business, and it's really unlawful for either of them to kind of take the other, outside our business. And if they want to do it, we ask that they wait 6 months. So I really don't understand. This really limits itself to taking someone to another agency. Most of what I'm referring to is the gray market. That's really the problem area. So this doesn't make a ton of sense to me, what they wrote.
Well, their comment, if I recall, basically was to say that it would, in effect, be an interruption of care, that a client, develops a rapport and a relationship with a caregiver, and if that caregiver then is banned from working with that individual, then it's, a very disruptive situation, in particularly because most often these are fragile individuals, elderly, and it would be a serious disruption. That, I believe, Mark, was their comment. Do you have any retort to that?
Well, I mean, I think they limit it to when someone's moving from one agency to another. And I think if that were the language they were looking for a carve out for, I'm not as opposed to that. I'm again focused on when there's no transference to another agency where they're both kind of going to the gray market, if you will.
And how do we know that?
Well, because you would know that because both the client and the caregiver would say, "I'm working for XYZ agency." You know, when we followed up with the client to say, "We noticed Mary Jane's still working for you," she would say, "Yeah, and I'm getting care from Right at Home right now." And that would be a situation where we would say, "Okay, you're working for Right at Home, understood." But it's more the situation where, we noticed Mary Jane's car is still in your driveway every morning.
Response teams and reentry centers.
I think we have to mute folks. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's more the situation where the client, Mary Jane's car continues to be in the client's driveway, and the client doesn't really have an answer for why Mary Jane continues to provide care when the client's no longer a client of ours. The way it works is all of a sudden you get a termination notice from a client at the same time you get a resignation from a caregiver, and you're like, what's going on here? So it's part of a collusion is really what we're trying to prevent. If someone's unhappy with our agency, they have every right to go wherever they want. We don't even have notice periods in our agreements. They can call us up and terminate the next day. And our caregivers, again, they can work for multiple agencies. We're not prohibiting that.
So Mark, our lens on this is from the small business perspective. You do allude to the fact that, there are contractual issues, involved, but from a small business, can you comment on this change that happened in 2019?
Sure. So, if you look at home care, it has two assets. It has its clients, right, which it spends a lot of money to obtain through marketing, brand building, right? Our single biggest expense outside of staffing our cases is around marketing. So we spend, into the thousands of dollars for every new client we get on marketing. And when we get that client, what we do is we have an agreement with them. As part of that agreement, we say, if you want to try to hire this caregiver privately, you owe us a fixed sum of money, which they agree to in the agreement. Right? And we have the same kind of language in our caregiver contract saying that you will not solicit our clients. They are our clients, right? They're our customer. That's our main asset is our client. That's where we spend all of our marketing dollars. And then we spend a lot of development dollars around our caregivers, right? Training them, finding the right, our asset in the market is the care we provide. That's how we sell ourselves. We are going to provide you with the best care. So when I go out there and find the great caregivers and train them and provide them with benefits and good work hours and a good work environment, I don't want my client stealing that.
Mark, can you just comment? So this has been in existence now since 2019. What has the effect been on the association and your business?
Sure. I think I thought Mr. Markley was going to testify as to a survey we did, but I can tell you from from my
He
own,
is signed up.
I can tell you from my own personal experience. So Joe's got the results of a survey we did within our membership, but I have no leg to stand on now when one of these issues comes up, because based on the way that law was written, my contract is void with my client, and the same thing with my caregiver. So someone can steal, either one can steal the other privately off the books, which let's just talk about that for a minute. It puts the senior at risk. I mean, the benefit of having a home care agency is the supervision and monitoring of the case that they get from the agency. If they have one caregiver who took them privately off the books, they're at risk for whatever that caregiver might do to them, because they're now not part of, they're not supervised. And, needless to say, they're not paying taxes either to the state or the federal government, because they're in the gray market. And the same thing happens if the client steals the caregiver. They're subject to whatever happens to them. They have no backup if the caregiver gets sick, if the caregiver gets injured.
Yep. Hey, Mark, can you talk about this from a regional or even a national perspective? Is this now unique to Connecticut? Other states, do they have the model that we've now embraced since 2019?
Sure. Connecticut is the only state that has this law. And Massachusetts actually went so far as that when Massachusetts introduced a non-compete language, and this was several years ago, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, they actually specifically excluded the non-solicitations. They actually stated that this does not in any way impact non-solicitation agreements, because they were listening to the business community.
Mm-hmm. So we are the only state in the United States
Correct.
that
Bans
now,
solicitations in home care and no hire agreements and non-competes, all three.
all right. Thank you for being with us. We're trying to get our arms around this situation. I guess I should just say that the thing that raises a red flag is that when we don't have a bill in front of us to have a complete vetting and understanding of a change in policy, and it happens in, buried deep in an implementer or in a budget, that is a concern. But thanks very much, Mark. And I think Rep. Thomas had her hand up. Do you, madam?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Mr. McGoldrick. I'm new to this committee, so I'm not aware of the history. I'm a small business owner who works with clients. I certainly have written my fair share of non-competes and understand that when you sink the cost of all of that, it's disheartening to see people, make these unofficial allegiances. Yet as a manager, I've often wanted, or there are some people I've exempted from this non-compete, if you will. And my only comment is the way this is written, I'm certainly not a contract lawyer, but I read this as almost mandating a 1-year non-compete on line 12. And to me, it should be limited in duration, not to exceed 1 year. And I guess my question for you is just whether this bill gets adopted or not, I don't know. But if that language were changed to make that more open-ended, so organizations could opt out to a smaller non-compete window, would you be opposed to that?
No, I think we've even voiced a willingness to have it limited to 6 months.
Yeah, the 1 year just felt onerous to me because I know, especially in smaller organizations, sometimes you're willing to let a client go and it's in their best interest and the company's. So you might not want that 1 year. So thank you for that. That's my only question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rep. Thomas. Representative Buckby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McGoldrick, for your testimony today. I guess my hang up on this, and maybe I'm looking at it differently, or I haven't caught something, but similar to any business obviously doesn't want to train people to have them leave within a certain amount of time. And obviously I'm sensitive to what you do and what the care provides, but how does this differ from let's say a chef is taught in a restaurant and then within a year, a client goes elsewhere too to follow the chef? To me, the kind of the fair market value for the employee and for the person they're serving, I don't know, it just balances out. So I'm a little lost on that part, is why this is different.
So the reason that analogy is not the same is someone eating in a restaurant is different than someone being my client, right? The person who came to my restaurant to eat didn't sign an agreement with me saying that they wouldn't follow the chef wherever he went, right? The client that I service signs an agreement with me saying they're not going to solicit my caregivers privately or otherwise. So that's the difference. They've signed an agreement acknowledging that they're not going to do this.
Okay, so I understand they're signing something. There's no option for them not to sign when they come on as your client, though, right? They have to sign that in order to be getting the service.
Correct.
So they're kind of in a tough spot, right? If they're unhappy or happier with something else.
I'm one of several hundred people who provide the service in Connecticut, so they're not really in a tough spot.
No, I'm not saying you in particular, sir, by no means. I'm just trying to get an understanding of this. If the client is unhappy and wants to go and likes their caregiver but doesn't like the company or whatever it might be, they're kind of locked into something. They're locked into a contract, whether they want to be there or not. And that's what my concern is, right?
They're locked into an agreement, right, for a specified period of time. Correct.
So if they change their mind, they're still locked in. If they're unhappy, they're still locked in.
Well, they could go to another agency and find another caregiver. I mean, and as I've already said, if they were to go to another agency and seek to, and then the caregiver were to join that agency, that's not really something we're trying to pursue here. It's when they take the caregiver privately and off the books is what we're really focused on.
So really that gray market that you're talking about is the only primary concern you have.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, if that caregiver wants to go to work for themselves, if they want to go jump through the hoops and get the certifications and be it done properly, and then come back because that client wants to go with them, that client's still locked into your agreement, though, right?
I'm not sure I understand that scenario. Did the caregiver start their own agency?
Yeah, let's say they say, I'm going to start my own private business. I want to step out and do this on my own. I don't like the corporate field or whatever it is they don't like about where they're working. They want to start their own business.
Well, I think we would look for a period of time that they have to limit, that they can't do that for the caregiver.
And that's where it comes back to me for the chef that leaves the restaurant, or whatever analogy we want to use for any business that trains someone to do something specifically. If they go off on their own, they've made that personal connection with the client. The client is comfortable with them, especially in so many situations, as you know, how personal that can become for the individual and liking that caregiver, because sometimes it's difficult to find someone who they get along well with and the family gets along well with. And, obviously it's always a very personal thing. That's my only concern.
I guess I would ask you, if everybody's getting along so well, why are they leaving?
Well, I mean, and why do we need the legislation too? If that's the case, why do we need to have someone on a contract? Is that response to it, as opposed to they may be unhappy with part of it and not all of it. You know what I mean? They might like their caregiver, but they might have a better price somewhere else, and they need to watch their dollars too.
They're welcome to go somewhere else, just not with someone who works for me. Again, this is getting back to this is where I've invested my money. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I have hundreds of thousands of dollars at risk. Okay. In building a business. And you're saying, you know what? Who cares?
Well, I'm not saying that at all, sir. I'm just trying to get an understanding from where you're at. same as I would for a place that has a regular clientele that someone leaves and follows that individual. I mean, that's the risk of business and in a free market environment too. So I just don't want to take that freedom away from someone who wants to pursue something on their own as well and has personal connections maybe with the client. But I appreciate your feedback. I'm trying to get my head around it as far as it being different from another industry doing the same thing. But I'll certainly read your written testimony. I'd like to hear what others have to say, and I appreciate you coming and giving your testimony. Thank you, sir, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Buckby. Madam Co-Chair, Representative Simmons.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. McGoldrick, for your testimony today and for all your work at the Home Care Association, and especially during this difficult time and all your support for seniors. I very much appreciate your testimony today, and can definitely understand the need for this, and what you're saying about all the investments that you have to make in terms of hiring and training and onboarding these professionals, and the significant financial risk you take in that. But then I also understand the importance of continuity of care and making sure we're focusing on serving clients in need during this difficult time. And I wanted to ask, I saw that it looks like there was nearly all positive or supportive testimony for this, except for the Department of Social Services opposed this based on the Covenant of Care definition. And just wanted to see if you'd had a chance to connect with DSS on this and perhaps work together on compromise language.
I have not yet. But I know that Mr. Markley, who's going to speak after me, has some relationships with DSS. But and that might be an option here. I mean, part of the history is that DSS worked with a legislator in particular to get this bill passed when it got passed. And kind of stuck it in where they did. So they did it due to some animosity that they have towards kind of one company, and they try to penalize the whole industry for it. So there's some history here that DSS is involved with contributing to this. So I don't know that they're impartial is what I would say. And since I only do private caregiving, I don't have any relationship with DSS because I don't have Medicaid clients. But I could talk to Mr. Markley about that. But they haven't been very forthcoming historically, I would say, just to, give you my 2 cents on that.
Got it. Thanks for that answer. And yeah, I think that would be good to hear if Mr. Markley is able to connect with them. And just wanted to ask, I know this has already sort of been asked, but sort of echoing some of the questions of my colleagues on, the importance of continuity of care and, prioritizing clients, while of course at the same time being cognizant of your concerns. Is there any additional language that you would recommend in order to strengthen this bill and address those concerns?
To strengthen the actually existing law, or to correct it?
Exactly. Yes.
So, if you want to correct the existing law, all you have to do is strike paragraph 2, which says, there's paragraph 1, which is talking about why a non-compete is not valid. And then it says, and it's little 2, and it says, an individual. And that's where it voids all the contracts because it's tied to a specific individual. So if you just had subparagraph 1 there and eliminated subparagraph 2, that would be a perfect bill. That would address non-compete language and the caregiver's ability to work at multiple places.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then just final question, just wanted to echo the good chairwoman's question about us being the only state. So just wanted to verify no other state has a law like this in place. We're the exception here.
Yes. It's
Okay.
a very unfriendly business law. I mean, if you tried to pass this across like all industries in Connecticut, your phone wouldn't stop ringing. just to be honest with you. I mean, it's egregious. It really is.
Great. Well, really appreciate your testimony today. Thank you for being with us. And those are all my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Representative Simmons. Mark, let me just circle back though on one thing here so that I understand it. You're saying that your concern is specifically when this situation occurs and the individuals go to, as you describe it, the gray market.
Yes, that's what I'm most concerned about.
So with regard to the colloquy you just had with Representative Simmons on striking paragraph 2, would it not be qualifying it to that particular circumstance?
You could do that. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it. I'd have to really sit down with it and to come up with something that would only qualify when there was a gray market kind of event. I could look at that. I know I can work with Matt Hallisey from HCAOA on that and come back with something pretty quickly.
And what's your definition of gray market? I mean, we're kind of understanding this term, but how do you describe that?
That would be not working with another agency. Privately. Privately. It would be in a situation where there was no agency relationship on either part, really, right? The caregiver or the client.
And so what we effectively would be saying is that in this sector, we would be banning sole proprietors.
No,
we don't do that.
Well, here's the thing. If someone doesn't have an HCA registration number or work for an HCA, they're doing things privately, right? So you're really just saying that they either have to have an HCA registration number or they have to be employed by someone with an HCA registration number.
Because right now in other states, can individuals who do not have such a registration work privately?
I don't know what other states do around. I mean, I really can't answer that. I don't think the legislature addresses the private market, then they become kind of domestic workers, if you will. So I don't really think there's a lot of legislation in any state dealing with people who are not working for a company, if you will, but working on their own.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you so much we're just trying to kind of make some sense out of this scenario here. I see no other questions for Mark, and if that is indeed the case, then I'm going to move on to our next person who signed up, and that's Joe Markley, who's with Companions and Homemakers.
Madam Chair, sorry, Marshall Collins said he's back and able to testify.
He's back? Okay,
Yeah.
Marshall. He's got us going crazy here. You with us, Marshall?
Yes, it's Randy Collins. Marshall, given name, but when I hear Marshall, I think of, I look for my father. My name is Randy Collins. I'm an advocacy manager with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. And sorry for any confusion. We had to reschedule another meeting so I could offer some testimony quickly this morning or this afternoon in support of 6440, an act establishing the Job CT tax rebate program. I'll keep my testimony brief, as I know Commissioner Lehman discussed the program at length. But CCM does support this program, especially that a lot of the efforts of this program will be focused on providing opportunities within the 72 federally designated opportunity zones and/or 25 distressed municipalities. As we're hopefully coming out of the COVID pandemic, there's significant concern among our members of the long-term impact this is going to have on our local economic base. Additionally, what impact that's going to have on our property tax base, as we've seen over 600 restaurants close, We've seen reductions in our brick and mortar retail, and a lot of them are still hanging on by their fingernails. And how are we going to rebuild the economic base for our communities? As we lose those businesses, that's going to force us to shift property tax liabilities to our residential and raise the mill rate, which is going to make it even harder for companies looking to relocate. Because, when you're locating a business here, and if you come into West Hartford and you have a 40+ mill rate, that puts you at a significant economic disadvantage versus other states that don't rely as heavily as we do on a local property tax. So the idea of creating economic incentives that aren't based on mandated property tax exemptions is something that CCM strongly supports. As I said, we're looking for tools, options to help us grow our economy, locate good jobs here, but at the same point, not by providing mandated property tax exemptions that are just going to shift the burden from that business to our other commercial owners or our residential property owners. And happy to answer any questions that you have.
Randall, thank you for being with us and for testifying on this bill. I'm imagining you're tracking a lot of other bills that are before the legislature this year, and specifically in the Finance Committee as well. But yeah, thanks for weighing in and representing CCM on this. Are there questions from my colleagues? Any questions? I don't see any hands raised. So with that, thanks for being with us today, Randall.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good day. So anyway, now that we're on to our fifth speaker, Joe Markley, my apologies there. We had someone signed up and then re-sign. Oh, you're with us. Hey, Joe.
Hello. Thank you very much, Senator, and my thanks to the distinguished chairs of the committee and the membership of this committee. I'm Joe Markley. I'm Communications Liaison for Companions and Homemakers. And I very much appreciate your consideration, which from your questions, you obviously have taken seriously, of SB 879, an act concerning non-solicitation agreements in the home health services industry. I'll say the home care program, which permits the use of federal and state funds for medical and non-medical home care in Connecticut, is one of the great successes of state government in this state. In the 36 years the program has been in place, it has enabled tens of thousands of seniors to remain safely in their homes where they want to be. And by helping seniors avoid long-term institutional care, it's saved taxpayers well over $1 billion. Most of the service essential to this program is provided by agencies like Companions and Homemakers. And the value we bring to this system is the match we create between people in need of service and caregivers who can help them, and the training and the oversight and support we give to that relationship. Our care managers understand the needs of the talents that our caregivers bring and have experience to assess the needs of our clients, and that expertise enables them to make the right match of caregiver to client, then to monitor the relationship and to make sure that backup is there when needed. Creating and nurturing this relationship is at the heart of what we do as a business. 2 years ago, a law went into effect banning non-compete agreements in the home care industry. And the fact is, non-compete agreements weren't a problem in home care. We have long permitted our caregivers to work for other agencies simultaneously and to have their own private clients. And there's no need for a caregiver to move to a different agency and take a client with them, insofar as they can stay with us with that client and take as many clients at another agency as they want to. They don't have to be exclusive to an agency. Our concern with the bill, as you've heard, is that the law went much further, banning non-solicitation agreements as well. Non-solicitation agreements prevent employees from taking existing clients to another agency or converting them into private clients. It's a protection available to virtually every business in every state. Non-solicitation agreements stabilize the provision of home care. Without this protection, the match we make between caregiver and client, which is the value we bring to home care, can be taken from us. Mark McGoldrick referred to the survey I was going to mention. Home Care Association of America and the Connecticut Association for Healthcare at Home jointly did a survey of home service providers. And 90% of them over 90% of them indicated that in the last year, they have lost clients or caregivers or both since the law went into effect. Agency home care provides stability for both caregivers and clients. Our managers monitor the work of our caregivers, offer guidance, and make changes as needed, and find substitutes and replacements to provide assistance when a caregiver is unavailable. The agency model is the most popular for home care services because people see the benefits we provide. This bill would allow us to ask caregivers to respect our existing relationship with clients by continuing to serve the people we match them with through our agency during the time of their employment with us, and in the case of our contracts, for 6 months afterwards. It's a reasonable and customary agreement critical to protecting the agency model for home care in Connecticut. I appreciate your scrutiny of this bill. I hope you'll consider supporting it. And I'm here with Martin Acevedo, who's the counsel for Companions and Homemakers. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Joe. Good to see you.
Michael.
Yeah, we're trying to get our arms around this situation. I think, as was indicated, this kind of came by virtue of a surprise kind of, back end legislation. But then again, we have the department, which it seems to be in opposition to going back to the old way of doing business. And is there any conversations that are going on? Because we initially had asked those representing this sector to reach out to the department in view of the position that they've taken.
I don't know what the lobbyists may have done on this. We've had conversations before the bill passed 2 years ago and over the period since then, without really feeling like we made much progress. Mark McGoldrick was characteristically blunt about our problems in dealing with the department. I think that we would like to work with the department. Let me put it this way. We'd very much like to work with the department to come up with an acceptable format for this legislation. And Mark stressed the rarity of the prohibition that's placed on our contractual possibilities. I think in light of how unusual the situation is, it would be very useful for them to try to talk with us about what we see and what we hope to prevent.
So yeah, I think that's kind of a to be continued issue here, because obviously they are pivotal to this sector, to the agency, and there's got to be kind of some coordination here. But you talked about this survey. Give us a little more facts about the survey. So when was the survey done? How many people were in the survey in relation to what the whole universe is? And 90% said they lost clients and caregivers. Was that explicitly they could link to this particular situation?
I believe I could share the survey with you, Senator. I would say it was done, I believe, as recently as December of last year. And it was mailed out to a large number of providers, of which fewer than half responded, as is often the case in surveys of this sort. I'm willing to, I guess I'd be willing to admit that I think the people that suffered losses or felt they did were probably more likely to respond to the survey than people who perhaps hadn't been affected by it. I think that Mark was explaining a little bit how it is that one perceives that caregivers and clients have left together. It's not necessarily something that is that can be obviously determined except by observation. So I think when over 90%, it was just over 90% that said they had lost either caregivers or clients or both since the law took place. They felt that it was as a result of caregivers taking clients either off the books into a private situation or to another agency. So that also included home health care companies as well as home care companies.
Okay, Joe, thanks. So when previous to the 2019 change, what was the time frame that the non-solicitation, non-compete was in existence? Was it 12 months, 6 months?
I don't think there was a legal restriction on it, but I know at Companions and Homemakers it was 6 months. And I think the legislation before you says a year. I think a year would be kind of an outlier as a length of time. And what that means is during the time of employment and for 6 months thereafter, or for a year thereafter, not to solicit the employee, the client who the employee was actually introduced to by the agency. It's not a relationship that would have existed unless an agency had brought the two people together.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other conversation that we had a little bit earlier with Mark was about this category of gray market. How would you define or categorize that? And I guess, Joe, are you in agreement with the fact that really the objective would be to target that instance where an individual is moving to be totally independent, or I guess if the description is the gray market?
You know, I don't know. It's interestingly not something that Mark McGoldrick and I have discussed too much. I suppose I would say that there seems to be more danger in an elderly client leaving the oversight of an agency altogether. As I said, one of the really essential protections that an agency provides is if the caregiver is not available, they've got a stable of people, and they can track somebody else who can step in quickly, even if they have to pay them a bonus to do it. And if a caregiver ceases service, another person can be provided, a person who's suitable. And Companions and Homemakers, if they don't like one, we'll try another. We'll find the person that works for them. So it's a little more dangerous, I think, for an at-risk elderly person to leave agency oversight altogether. That said, I think that the disruption to the industry that could occur as a result of agencies effectively trying to poach clients and caregivers from each other would also be a problem. So I'm not really comfortable with either of those situations, but I think that Mark is right to say that the gray market with people go off the charts is perhaps the more dangerous of the two. And the client, in effect, becomes a kind of an accidental employer. All of a sudden, the client who has been going through the agency and having the reassurance of making sure the taxes are paid and the unemployment compensation and everything else is now responsible for all of that, or the caregiver ceases to have those kinds of protections at all.
Yeah. I can see what you're talking about. Do we have, and I don't know, since 2019, if it's not surfaced or not, but to your knowledge, any evidence of instances where the not having oversight became a problem?
No, I'm not aware of anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I haven't
all right.
looked for it, to tell you the truth. I mean, it might be that if we went out to the agencies in the association that they'd have examples, but I haven't. It's not something that I've sought.
Yeah. No, once again, some of this stuff is kind of amorphous until it might happen and be too late. I'm just trying to see if we've got any hands raised. I do not see any. Yes, if there's any more information that you think would be helpful, Joe, with regard to, this sector, the members, with regard to the survey and so forth, if you haven't already provided it, please do.
I will, and I have written testimony that I'll submit this afternoon. It's different from what I've said, but the same thrust, obviously.
Okay, much appreciated. Thanks. Good to see you, Joe.
I think you've got a question, maybe, if I'm not misreading it from.
I don't. Oh, yes, we've now got some.
I'm sorry. I just raised my hand.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm looking here at this. Yeah, the panelists. So yes, thank you, Representative Exum. You do have the floor, madam.
I just have a question. Thank you so much, Mr. Markley. I'm just curious. What does it cost to do roughly the training that is required in order for a caregiver to go in? And I'm wondering if there is a contract. What happens if you are aware of someone breaking this contract? What does that look like?
I don't know that the training cost could necessarily be quantified, because it really is training which is individual to the client. So depending on the person coming in and who they're going to be serving, obviously the idea is to match the talents and the abilities to the caregiver as well as possible to the client. We've got clients, the things that are involved in non-medical home care, I feel are as essential as what is provided by the home health services, in that it's toileting, bathing, cooking, cleaning, errand running, things that make it possible for people to stay at home. I think that a new caregiver would require a good round of instruction and on the basics of toileting and that sort of thing. We also instruct caregivers who work with people that have memory problems, specifically about how to deal with clients like that best for the happiness of the client. So it's a situation where you'd say it depends from client to client. Another thing that is an expense for the agency is that we do background checks on all the people that we bring in. And it's a big business. There's 30,000 caregivers in the state of Connecticut. And so a good sized agency has a fair investment in their caregivers across the board. And your second question, Representative, if you're satisfied with the first?
I just wanted to know, what's the consequence if you find this situation takes place?
That was something that Mark McGoldrick kind of went around the edges of, and I think I'm glad you brought it up again. It's not a situation where we're looking to punish caregivers or clients or put somebody in a difficult situation. It's not something that has been pursued legally in most cases. Usually it's a matter of calling the caregiver and saying, you have an obligation to us to keep that, to serve that client through the agency. And that's generally been enough to resolve the situation. It's been a very rare case that anything has been pursued legally that way. And really only in the case of companions and homemakers, some years back, when a number of our caregivers were taken to different agencies, was the only time that we pursued in any large way any kind of legal option.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to understand this a little bit more as well, but I'm familiar with both sides of this.
Yes.
I've seen both sides of this personally, so it is interesting. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Martin, do you have a question, sir? I think Senator Martin had his hand up. Maybe it's down right now. Representative Buckby, you have a question, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We'll circle back to Henry. Yes.
Yeah, it looks like he's on the phone, maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. I don't say this very often. I'm going to give that term right back and say hello, Senator Markley. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I just had the same question. I'm trying to wrap my head around this as well, as we all seem to be in the same boat on this. My question really is on the fair market piece. One of the things the last gentleman who spoke on it said, why would they want to leave? Well, I mean, it's the same as any company. If I either price or don't like the company that this person's working for and they shift companies. I want to go with the individual I know. Maybe I don't like the company that overall sees things, or I see that somebody could maybe be making more money somewhere else. I like that caregiver and I want to follow them and support them, but I feel like I'm now locked into a contract, and it feels like the energy thing where you can't leave your supplier because you signed for a year, whatever it might be. So I just want to get my head around it better, that this is not handcuffing the individual receiving the service as well, because that's my biggest concern. Is we want that person to be happy. Sometimes it's short care, sometimes it's long care, but we want them to be happy with their service. And if they want to leave, they wouldn't be allowed to leave, right?
I'm glad you asked the question, because when you were asking Mark McGoldrick, I was looking for the opportunity to jump in and answer it. So good. Let me give you a little bit of a anecdotal comparison. You mentioned, you put it in terms of if a chef's working at a restaurant and goes to another restaurant, why can't the patrons of the restaurant follow him? I think the difference is, let me tell you something from my own experience. I on and off for years, I've taught college board courses and tutored kids preparing for SATs and GREs. And I've always done it through a company. And I remember the first time I did it, my goodness, it was probably 40 years ago. I had, I think, 20 high school students in the class, and I thought, what one of them is paying is covering my entire salary for this. And of course, the danger for the company would be to say, not only have we given you the training in how to provide these courses, which is an investment, but we've now introduced you to these 20 students. And after the first class, if I said to them, hey, don't come back here, next week we'll meet at a McDonald's and you can pay me half as much, everybody would come out ahead. As far as me and the students go, the only person that would be hurt would be the company. Now, I think the parallel is to say the relationship, which is so prized that the client wants to follow the caregiver, is the relationship that we established. In fact, that we identified like a dating service, where we said, we think we've got two people that would be perfect for each other. Let's bring them together. All we ask is that particular relationships, the ones that we specifically established, continue to be honored by those two parties. The caregiver can, at the time, could continue to serve those clients and start her own company. Could go to as many other agencies simultaneously as she wants, and with no limitation in time and space. The only thing we ask that be honored is the fact that we made the effort not only to train the caregiver, but to put the caregiver with that client. And it seems to, I guess the flip side of it is, just as I was saying about the College Board Company, at the point at which their trainers can leave with the classes, pretty soon you're not going to have College Board Companies. It might not happen immediately, but in effect, you go from being an employer to being a reference agency. And that's what we're afraid in time might happen to home care agencies.
I appreciate that, and it's well said. My concern with that, and to use the same analogy, the chef analogy I brought up, because it just hit me because I'm a big guy and I like food. But in that same regard, it falls on the company hiring the person, keeping their employee happy, keeping them well paid, keeping them treated well. And that's usually why people don't leave, right? When people leave a business they work for, it's because they feel like A, they're not treated well, or B, they're not compensated fairly, and they want to leave that organization. To me, and this is my concern with this legislation, is are we implementing legislation to protect just a business owner? Which, don't get me wrong, I love supporting local business owners, but I don't know if that's so much legislation as it is good practice and hiring people and hiring people of character that you treat well, that want to stay working for you, as opposed to someone who goes, you know what, I don't like the way this company's treating me, I'm going to go elsewhere. And when they go to say goodbye to that client, they're saying, hey, look, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm working for another company now. And that client goes, geez, I want to stay with you, because the client doesn't have any necessarily connection with the organization, right? That they might want to be more connected with that individual who's caring for them. I'm just trying to think of it, if it's me working with, let's say my parents needed someone to help care for them, my concern is going to be that I want my parents to make that choice that's best for them, and if that person wants to work for another agency, I don't want them to say, geez, we lost somebody really good, and now I have to go with somebody with this agency because I'm locked in a contract with them. I don't think it does the best service for the client, is my biggest concern. Now, I understand the protection of the business, and that's like any business. You train employees and employees can leave. I mean, electricians they'll work for one electrician and they'll have to go to another because they find a better job for themselves or closer to home or whatever it might be. But I might not have the best analogies, but I think the biggest concern is that the client has that option and has that flexibility to what's best for the client. Because I know, and knowing you well enough, that's what your biggest concern is, right? That's your biggest concern within your organization, to make sure the client is cared for and happy and healthy. So I guess I'm kind of going around with a lot here, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'd love your feedback on that. I'm not laying blame, and the previous gentleman didn't like my questions, I don't think, but I'm not here to cause waves. I want to understand this better so that I can understand what the legislation is going to do and if we need legislation for it.
I was involved in the creation of this home care program my first time around in the legislature, if such a thing can be believed. And so I have a kind of maybe a protective feeling towards it. And I think it's not so much that any individual company is threatened by the ability of people to leave and take clients with us, but I think the whole agency model is threatened by it. And I think too many people have perceived the agencies merely as a middleman. But anybody who's involved in any kind of business realizes the extent to which middlemen exist because there is a need for a connection between two parties. So I can't get my steak straight from Kansas City, so somebody has to get it to me. An elderly person in need of care or their family doesn't necessarily have the capacity to go out and do background checks on individual caregivers, find out who has the right set of skills and so forth. They rely on an agency like ours to do that work for them. And it's because it's done well that they develop the bond with the caregiver that then would make them want to follow that person. If we become essentially an employment referral agency, introducing people and then seeing them go, not only would does it undo the business model, but it means that the oversight that the agencies provide, not just the match, but the ongoing oversight, the ability to identify situations sometimes where the relationship between a caregiver and a client has become too close. And it's necessary because it's possible for elderly people to be susceptible to manipulation and so forth. These are things that we can oversee and take responsibility for. And I wouldn't want to see that that aspect of the system disappear. And the other thing I'd say, you mentioned, for instance, the notion of a plumber or an electrician. It's the same thing in a business. It's perfectly fine. A plumber comes to your house on behalf of a company, and again, he too could say to you, "Hey, next time you have a problem, just give me a call on my cell phone number, and we don't have to worry about the owner of the company." It's natural for the company to want to preserve the relationship that it has with the client. And if the plumber wants to go out and start his own business, that's a different situation. I mean, the advantage you have in home care is there's absolutely no barrier in the business to going out on your own. There's nothing saying that you can't have your own clients and that you can't have them at the same time you work for us. We have no time restriction or geographic restriction. It's only the relationship that we have with our specific clients that we ask be respected.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I understand that point. I get that. And that's part of the free market system that is part of the game. And I think that's also the concern for any business owner, that in any industry, right? And that's kind of my point is we don't have legislation for plumbers and electricians. We have, you know, we have judge of character. We have, you know, being a good business to work for that people want to stay working for. That's part of the issues of running and owning a business is, you know, if your staff isn't happy, they're going to go elsewhere. And if the staff isn't happy for whatever reason, they're going to go. And I understand you made the introduction and I understand the work that goes involved. It's not just a quick handoff middleman. It is a lot more involved. I guess my biggest issue with it is that free enterprise system is you're having to lock someone in that they, you know, again, you introduced someone, you know, 6 months ago. That was maybe the last interaction. I don't know, but they're seeing their caregiver on a regular basis. And you know, people are people. If that caregiver walks in the house and, you know, they're going to have a personal relationship with the individual and they're going to say, hey, yeah, just having a bad day, argued with my boss, whatever it might be. And I think my concern is it locks people into a situation that might not be the best situation for the employee or for the one being cared for. So I don't know as this is, to me, as much of a legislative need as it is an ethical question for that employee who's working for the organization and their loyalty.
You know, the one thing I'd say is we're not asking for a special situation relative to any business, other businesses. We're asking for exactly the same kind of protection that any other business is entitled to have in terms of respecting an existing relationship with a client. That was taken away from the industry by this bill 2 years ago. And it was taken away from it, you know, when Mark McGoldrick said it doesn't exist in any other state. We have a law firm that specializes in home care issues called Littler. And they've done a survey of all 50 states and what the laws are referring to non-compete, non-solicitation. And that's the sense in which we're the only one in which solicitation specifically is not something that we can prohibit by contract. But you can do so in home care in every other state, and you can do so in virtually every other business in the state of Connecticut. So the plumber example before, or my experience as a tutor, there was no objection, nor was I surprised when I was given a contract that said, you cannot take these students away, nor in that case, I mean, that included a non-compete, nor can you start providing tutoring service in this area of Connecticut. Okay, that's fair. That's what all businesses, virtually all businesses operate under. And what we'd ask is just to have the non-solicitation aspect of it restored to us.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much. Again,
thank you.
Senator, always great to see you. And,
likewise.
Hope all is well. I appreciate the good information. And Madam Chair, I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Senator Martin. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Markley, good to see you.
Likewise.
I won't be long. I just want some clarity, Joe, regarding the contracts that are with the client first, and then is there a contract when a caregiver comes on board? Let's begin with that first.
Yes, and this is the part that, well, we're concerned on both sides of it, but we were able, as part of the contract when the caregiver came on board, to ask them not to solicit our clients while they were employed for us for 6 months. And this was lost to us on that.
So is that language in the current contract?
No, because it's now prohibited.
It's prohibited, okay. So I guess I look at it from being a real estate broker, right? Yeah. The contracts that are with clients, my clients, are underneath the broker agreement, and then I have an agreement with my agents, and specifically in the agreement with the agents is they all know, it's very clear, and it's in statute that we have have that, and there's nothing that stops them from going to another agency. But that client that they are working with belongs to the broker. So I sort of coming at it from that perspective. Now, with that said, there's also, you're saying that there's also an agreement with a client?
Yes.
With your clients, when they enter an agreement with your caretaker agency, they have an agreement with them, correct?
That's right. And the agreement we have with the client also says that you won't leave with the caregiver for the terms of the care of the.
And is that allowable currently under law?
No.
That is not either.
I
But
don't think so.
do your agreements say that?
No.
So they're not in there, but that's what we're trying to do right now, is to have them in both contracts.
Is to be able to restore them to both contracts. That's exactly right.
Okay. So there is no contract between the caregiver, the person you hired, or or your client. There's no contract there. So it's only the company with the caregiver and the company with the client, correct?
Exactly. And it is very much a parallel to what you're talking about as being
Yes.
real estate broker.
Yeah,
You have
that's
a
how
relationship with the people that list, and you have a relationship with the people that are selling. And
Yep.
Yeah. And in
Yeah,
both
exactly,
cases,
because I know that the agents develop a relationship with the client, right? It's the broker's client, and should they leave, that relationship now transfers over to me, and it extends to the length of the contract. So,
yes.
Are your contracts a year long with your clients? Are they 2 years, 3 years?
6 months.
6 months. So at the end of the 6 months, they can decide to go somewhere else, and all restrictions are off, so to speak.
Well, they would still, from a specific, there's the former form of the contracts for non-solicitation would have said for that specific employee for 6 months after the end of your employment, you can't solicit them. Remember again in terms of the comparison to real estate, that in this business too, let's say we have a situation where agents could be working for multiple brokers simultaneously, unlike real estate. The only thing we'd be asking is that they not take our clients to those other agencies, that they respect our relationship with our clients and the other agencies' relationships with their clients.
Sure, that and that could, yeah, I could see that. But specifically to the client is once their contract is usually 6 months.
Yes.
A duration of 6 months. But so at the end of the 6 month, nothing stops them from going to where your caregiver may have gone to, correct?
For 6 months there.
Yeah, after they cease being a client, after they terminate their relationship with us, wait 6 months.
Yeah.
And then you can do,
Forgive me while I ask the expert. It is for the term of employment and 6 months afterwards. And it would be the same for the client, that they would be prohibited from using that caregiver under the contract for 6 months after the termination of the contract. Henry, or Senator, as a practical matter, it's not necessarily something that we would worry about enforcing, that we'd be tracking down people to say, oh, you got in touch with that caregiver and you went to work with them. But
No.
as a principle in the industry, it's important to understand that our relationship with clients be respected.
I totally understand that. And I know we're going to have a good discussion in screening regarding this bill. But I think we all want to be clear, what you're asking us to do here. How long does it take? And I thought the question was asked, and I was on another not screening, but another public hearing. But how long does it normally take to train on average one of your caregivers?
as the answer in part to that was, it depends on the caregiver and it depends on the client. Insofar as our goal is to match the caregiver who's the most appropriate to the client's need, the training doesn't necessarily take a while, especially when we have experienced caregivers. And some of our caregivers have been with the company for years.
Yep, I get that.
There's not a standard introductory training program because each case is individual. So people need to understand, depending on what they're doing, the bathing, toileting, help with memory challenges and so forth, that kind of individual care is given depending on what the client needs. It's a matter of hours. It's not a matter of weeks.
No, I can understand, each client there are certain needs that have to be met, and sometimes you may have to train. However, the argument from what I hear is that, listen, you want to be compensated or protected from losing that time that you've taught an individual to be a good caregiver. You want to protect it and then not have free reign of taking your clients. So I'm just trying to get an understanding, gee, on average, how long does it take to train somebody to be a good caregiver? Is it 3 months, 6 months, a year?
It's not, to be a good caregiver is a matter of experience, which we can't expect to be compensated. The caregivers are compensated for that as they go. The training we give is what enables them to do the job initially. The expertise they develop is their own. And I think Mark McGoldrick made the point that there's a large investment on the client side too, because obviously we're advertising and seeking clients. There's a fair investment, Senator, just in finding the caregivers too, especially in this economy and especially under the current circumstances. It's a constant challenge to find people to employ in the business. So we make an investment on both sides in searching for people.
So Joe, regarding the duration, the limited time here, it sounded like there might be some room of reducing that from 1 year to maybe 6 months. Is that your understanding?
I would certainly think so. And as I said, our agency has always, when we had that provision, it was for 6 months only.
Okay. Joel, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming in and clarifying a lot here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I didn't even have to come in. That's the beauty of.
So true. All right. Thanks again, Joe.
Thank you, Senator Martin. Representative Nucio. You had your hand raised.
Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't find my button. So, hello, Mr. Markley. How are you?
Good.
Quick question for you. I've heard this mentioned twice now, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. We're the only state in the U.S. that does not have this, but this that I'm asking about, is this a non-compete or is this a non-solicitation?
It's the ban on non-solicitation. There's many states, I guess I could say many states that have prohibitions on non-compete agreements, but ours is the only one, according to the survey that Littler did, that specifically bans non-solicitation agreements.
Okay. All right. That's all that I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rep. Nucio. I do not see any other hands raised here. I want to thank you, Joe, for being with us and for the work that you're doing. And it is true that since we started the offing of the money follows the person, then the home care industry was a very important part of that whole horizon, and even more so now in this new COVID situation. Having witnessed, what happens in institutional settings. So thanks much for being with us, Joe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I would like to move on to our last speaker today. Last but not least, Lynn, thanks for hanging in with us. Lynn Ward with the Waterbury Chamber of Commerce. You have the floor. I think you're muted, Lynn.
I'm sorry about that.
There you go.
Madam Co-Chairs, Senator Hartley and Representative Simmons, and ranking members, Representative Buckby and Senator Martin, and members of the Commerce Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak about Senate Bill 429, an act concerning grants to chambers of commerce. I'm Lynn Ward, President and CEO of the Waterbury Regional Chamber. I'm also President of the Connecticut Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives and member of Connecticut's Metro Chamber Group. The chamber industry was created in the 1800s to support and attract industry, promote business growth and development, and to promote the communities we serve. Chambers of Commerce in Connecticut represent thousands of businesses and hundreds of thousands of employees. We are not-for-profit organizations primarily funded by membership dues and other revenue derived from activities. Although our mission is to serve our members, it was evident that during COVID-19, chambers were relied upon by all businesses in our diverse communities. As an industry, we made a conscious decision to serve and continue to serve regardless if the business is a Chamber of Commerce member. This has put increased financial and workforce strain on our organizations. Chambers, like the Waterbury Regional Chamber, were forced to eliminate more than 50% of our staff, pivot to work from home, invest in technology, create digital programming, which was quite a challenge for us as our industry is driven by in-person networking. Although we were not classified as essential businesses, we never shut down and we reacted immediately because our role to support Connecticut's economy is essential. Providing assistance to small businesses, whether financial guidance such as timely PPP information or other state and SBA financial assistance programs, or COVID-19 regulations, workforce development initiatives, new Connecticut employment laws such as FMLA, sexual harassment compliance, minimum wage increases, and other employment-related policies, or promoting buy local campaigns and supporting the restaurant industry with the Bring Your Own Blanket campaign, or tourism-related support. We are active, effective, and efficient organizations that provide services that lead to employment, quality of life, and a strong economy for the state of Connecticut. While we work together to recover from the pandemic, perhaps a state-funded service provider contract through DECD could be made available to Connecticut Chambers of Commerce for operational support. Funding could be helpful for us to continue the good work we do to deliver value to businesses throughout the state of Connecticut. Thank you for the opportunity to advocate for the chamber industry today.
Lynn, thank you so much for being with us, and also congratulations to you on your role representing not only the Greater Waterbury Chamber of Commerce, but also the association in the state. And I would just offer that they are in good hands because the Waterbury Regional Chamber has really always been very engaging and boots on the ground, working collaboratively through legislative sessions. Just a general question about 429. We have this situation come across that talked about the fact that there were some out-of-state chambers benefiting from incentive programs, economic incentive programs from Connecticut. Are you aware of that situation?
I was not aware of that, and speaking to many of my chamber colleagues, we were not aware of that either. So actually, there's not just a blanket grant program available that we are aware of that we would be able to apply for. So I'm not sure what the impetus of this bill is.
Well, that's exactly what we're about the business of doing, is trying to understand what in fact might have occurred and just determine whether or not we have definitive policy about that. Of course, I always stand accused of being very parochial first, looking, at our districts and at the state. and knowing our limitations, in particularly our financial restraints, that our target is always homegrown, to be very candid. So if in fact that has happened, we, and quite frankly, put down chambers, and what resources are within that particular association's reach. First of all, are you LLCs, 501(c)(3)s? What are you? General chambers?
We are a 501(c)(6). So we are not-for-profit. In the first round of PPP, chambers of commerce nationally were excluded from that. But in the second round, we are included.
Right, and that was where I was going with this. So you now can avail, chambers can avail themselves to a PPP. And do you have any kind of knowledge with respect to how many chambers are doing this? Because obviously you are small businesses. You live by virtue of your functions, which have been shut down, like so many venues, and also by your memberships. And as organizations have to live within their means, and businesses, been suspended, they don't have the resources for a lot of important things, chamber membership and association membership being one of them.
Correct. So many chambers are applying for the PPP. Unfortunately, because we weren't in the first round, a year ago is when we had to make those tough decisions to eliminate many staff members. So now the PPP, we're able to apply for it at much lower amounts than if we were to have been able to apply for it a year ago. But your point is well taken, that many businesses now are not joining chambers. So we're still doing what we've always, primarily what we've always done, but for, lesser number of dues paying members, but more companies who are relying on us.
Lynn, can you just share with us what was the differential in terms of the first PPP round and the second in terms of what you could actually apply for?
Well, with this second round, you're applying for 2.5 months of your current payroll. For example, our current payroll now is significantly less than it was a year ago, because we didn't have that financial support at that time. And the only thing we could do was eliminate some overhead, which meant eliminate 6 people here at the chamber, just at my organization here.
Do you have an idea statewide how many chamber employees have been laid off, terminated?
I don't know that number. I could do some research to find that out.
Yeah. And then lastly, is there potential to, and I'm just talking as an example here, Waterbury Regional Council lost 6 people. Is there potential now PPP loan?
I missed what you said, part of that, Senator.
Yeah, no, I said now that you can access the second tranche of PPP, is there, in your particular case, the opportunity to bring back all of those 6 individuals?
We won't be able to refill those positions until we can go back to our regular programming, which would be, in-person events and people feeling comfortable with that. And also, we need to build up some of the membership base in order to bring them back as well, because the PPP is only, those funds are only going to help for 2.5 months. So we wouldn't hire people until we knew that we would be able to sustain those salaries.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And thanks for hanging in there with us today and representing the chambers statewide. It's good to get direct testimony with regard to Senate Bill 429, as well as to hear generally from this sector. I don't see, yes. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. And if that's the case, thank you, Lynn. And we are at this juncture where there seems not to be any more folks signed up. So I would like to thank my colleagues and of course our team headed up by Ginger for being with us for today's public hearing. And we, at this point, members of the Commerce Committee, do not have anything scheduled for the next week. We will be trying to tee some things up as we have now a pretty robust list of bills that we have heard. Is there anything else, Madam Clerk, that needs to be discussed this time?
Nope, you covered everything.
Representative Simmons?
Nothing else from me. Thank you, Madam Chair, and great hearing today.
And Senator Martin?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Appreciate the everybody coming and testified, and we'll see you all in screening.
And Rep. Buckby?
I will echo that, and wonderful public hearing today. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks all. To be continued. Bye-bye. We officially are closing the public hearing today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.